Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss the reports from the weekend just gone, whereby people have been revealing how Boris Johnson's Brexit planning took precedence over preparations for the coronavirus pandemic, even after the World Health Organization had been warning all country as to how serious the situation was about to become. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, it's all kicked off. There's so many strands to this. But I would say that the UK government had not at any point taken the coronavirus pandemic as seriously as Brexit, even to this day, is fairly obvious. As one public health expert pointed out, the government created an entirely new department with a cabinet minister post just to deal with Brexit. There is nobody assigned for this crisis. Yes, you have the health secretary, but the coronavirus is not his sole remit. People haven't stopped being injured or becoming seriously ill with other ailments. The prime minister has also taken a lead, so we're told, as you'd expect in a time of emergency, but he is responsible for everything else in the country as well. And the same goes with other ministers who may have popped up and down from time to time to talk about it. Now, it might be different if the government really were listening to the experts and really were being led by the science in terms of their decision making. You wouldn't need a separate minister then, of course. Many other countries certainly don't need one. The health service would tell you you need a crap load more PPE and they would order it. Public health experts would say that you need to test rigorously to keep it under control, and you'd order loads more tests and make sure you've got the capacity to do that. They'd tell you to lock down the country if the containment failed, which it ultimately did, although not really failed. We deliberately stopped the containment phase, back in February. But we didn't. We waited 3 or 4 weeks after that point to actually lock the country down to any degree at all. And that was waiting 3 or 4 weeks effectively for the viral wildfire to spread. And we all know why that was. At the time that we should have been taking strong measures to prevent the worst of the oncoming storm, Boris Johnson was making a speech attacking countries who were imposing restrictions as a result of the pandemic, ridiculing them, he was. It didn't help that Johnson chose to listen to those who said that the coronavirus couldn't be stopped. It'd be very much like flu. It's going to be seasonal. You might as well just deal with it. Just let it happen, build up immunity in the population. But just because some virologists were saying that doesn't mean the government can't be blamed, because you might look at it and you might think, oh, it's all right looking at it in hindsight. The government were told by these people, and these people are experts, this thing. They were told by far more the opposite of that. If you choose to ignore the bulk of experts who said that there was no evidence whatsoever for that, and that the safest thing is to test, to trace, and to isolate. I mean, for once, President Trump of the United States said something vaguely sensible this weekend, whilst he was trying to deflect blame away from himself and onto China, which he does quite a lot. He said that there's a world of difference between doing something deliberately and making a genuine mistake. Now, I'm not sure he really intended the phrase to be used against his own motivations. After all, he's deliberately lied about the pandemic to his people. So it's not a mistake on his part, or he'd have been honest. But the same assessment needs to be made of Boris Johnson and his ministers as well. Some people told them that we should follow the World Health Organization advice. Frankly, I would suggest it's an act of imbecility to have ignored that and chosen to follow the advice of a small number of virologists who believed otherwise. But you could still put that down to a mistake, not a deliberate act. You believed the wrong people because they were telling you what you wanted to hear. That can be a mistake. But whichever approach the government were going to take to deal with the coronavirus was going to need significant resources assigned to it. In other words, a section of the civil service would need to be directed towards working on whichever strategy we adopted and making sure we were as well prepared as we could be, especially given that we'd failed to fund the pandemic strategy devised or designed, my brain couldn't work out which word to use, by this Conservative government a few years ago. Someone was saying in a comment on a video, the reason South Korea was so well prepared is because, they put in place pandemic strategy a few years ago, and it was all ready to go. Yeah, we developed a pandemic strategy a few years ago. Lots of other countries did. The difference is that we did not implement it in this country because, money. But instead, Boris Johnson, at the time at which we were supposed to be thinking to ourselves, right, this thing's coming, we're not ready for it, what we're going to do, he was busy minting special Brexit coins, talking up celebrations about leaving the EU, basking in what he was considering to be his great glory. Remember that he'd only just come out of his hidey hole in the Caribbean. He'd been away in the Caribbean for weeks. We had floods in the country. Where was Boris Johnson? Nowhere to be seen. He refused to organise an emergency COBRA meeting for the floods. And when it became clear that this pandemic was going to be quite serious for the UK as well, while he was still downplaying it, he refused to organise a COBRA meeting for that at first. Eventually he did, about a week late. And even then he couldn't be bothered to turn up, apparently, we're told. And that was all deliberate. Civil servants that could have been directed towards coronavirus planning were instead directed towards no-deal Brexit planning. Planning that has now been well and truly scuppered due to the pandemic, can't actually put anything in place for the end of the year, which will now affect us much worse because of this inaction, both Brexit and the pandemic. It's like we're not ready for either at all. And you can actually put off Brexit. You can't put off this pandemic. You can't say to the virus, sorry, you didn't make an appointment. Can you come back next year? It doesn't work like that. You can do that with Brexit. You can say to the EU, do you know what? We should really extend this for a couple of years because... And they'll go, yeah, of course. But no. I mean, I've already spoken in the past about how Brexit mentality has made the situation worse. That was self-evident. Refusing to coordinate with other European health departments means we miss out on vital intelligence. Refusing to join the procurement scheme for medical equipment, which has now been delivered to the other countries, yet that decision has aged very badly. So at the point at which Matt Hancock last week was telling our reporters that he can't wave a magic PPE wand, other European countries have taken receipt of their orders, which was in addition to the large orders that those nations had been making themselves as independent nations as well, which we also have not been doing. While other European nations are able to equip their medics with the PPE they need, we now have hospitals that have actually run out. They're not running out, they've actually now run out of operational gowns at least, and they aren't getting any anytime soon. And that is also deliberate. That was deliberate. That's not a mistake. But it is incredible to think now that at a time when more sensible nations were gearing up for this, our government was only interested in Brexit and selling it to the public, because January seems like an age away for me. I'm not sure about you guys. It seems like a very long time ago. And some may think that this emergency hit so fast it just took everyone by surprise, that back in January we couldn't possibly have known that this was going to happen. For the first few countries to be hit, yes, it was. But, for the general public, I can sort of see, a lot of the general public wouldn't have known that this, what we're in the middle of now, was going to be coming here. But Boris Johnson's government can't claim that ignorance. This isn't hindsight for them. He was specifically warned back in January, and ignored it. As recently as early March, weeks and weeks, over a month since he was warned this was coming, and other countries were going into lockdown at this point, Boris Johnson went to an international rugby match in order to emphasise just how little we should take this seriously. He was basically saying to the country, this isn't a big deal. People are panicking. I'm going to go to a rugby match. That there are people now ignoring the restrictions because they genuinely don't believe that there's anything for them to worry about. They just genuinely don't think there is largely down to this action. Yes, there would still be those who are downplaying it and saying there's nothing to it, even if Boris Johnson had provided good leadership from the start. Boneheads are boneheads. They exist everywhere. but others would have been swayed by the Prime Minister's insistence that it wasn't serious, that he has now changed his patter and has since come down with the virus and been knocking on death's door, is meaningless, because many people will listen to whichever viewpoint suits them best. And what suits some people best is being able to visit friends and family and enjoying the quieter roads, because all the suckers are isolating as much as possible. So even if Boris Johnson hadn't been distracted by Brexit and not diverted resources towards it when he should have been taking the pandemic rather more seriously, would it have actually made that much difference? I mean, my view is I think we'd be in a better place when it comes to PPE for the NHS. I think the reason why we've struggled so badly for that has been Brexit mentality. I think our shortage has definitely been largely driven by that Brexit mentality. But it seems likely that we'd still have adopted the restriction measures too late, regardless of Brexit. The herd immunity strategy was not really inspired by Brexit. It was inspired by trying to protect the economy whilst others would suffer to give us a competitive edge. So I think we'd have gone through that as well. In other words, I think the government's dangerous incompetence is down to more than just blinkered Brexit ideology, really. I think they are just generally useless, incapable of understanding the seriousness of a situation, particularly a changing situation, and a situation not of their creation. You know, it seems to me that they don't even understand Brexit that well. Dominic Raab proved it when he was Brexit Secretary for a few weeks by having to admit they didn't really understand how important a port such as Dover was to our trade routes. You know, so I don't... And Brexit they created themselves and they don't even understand that well. So the idea of them understanding a pandemic over which they have no control and limited influence now that the genie's out of the bottle should come as no surprise at all. And I still think a lot of what would have been done wrong would still have been done wrong. So the extent to which Brexit thinking has scuppered us, I think it's harmed the NHS, and I think many of the frontline NHS staff who are suffering, that is down to that Brexit mentality. But I think in general, in terms of the general population, the general measures around the country, I think that's just down to the fact that we've got a government of monkeys. But anyway, those are my thoughts. It is a right old mess and there's lots of factors that can possibly be thrown in as well. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.